Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today is another great show. Every show is great, but this show is definitely a show about, I won't even say overcoming, but more importantly, how to navigate through a lot of things that people would not even consider possible, not even considering that this could happen to them. But one thing about this show is we provide educational tools and resources. And a lot of that doesn't come from businesses and entrepreneurships. It comes from the people's stories that are on the show. Because the thing is, when you listen to somebody's journey, whether it be good, bad, or whatever, you want to know, how did they do it? How did you accomplish this? How did you get out of this? Oh, I can't believe this even happened. Today, we're going to be educated. And we may cry a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're going to learn how to survive and how to keep moving forward through trials, tribulations that some people say, I can't believe you've done that. Today on the show, all the way from Arizona, Glendale, by way of Phoenix. Let's welcome to the show. Beautiful name, Michelle Sexton, to the show. How you doing, baby girl?
I'm good, Andre. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I read your questionnaire and was completely at awe. And the more that I read it, the one thing that came in my mind was, how in the hell could this person get through this and be where she is, or he, but in your case, she is today? Before we get into that, tell the viewers a little bit about who you are.
Sure, be happy to, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm 39 years old. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, inner city Phoenix. Typically, I'm working in kind of a leadership position within tech, and right now I'm on the pursuit to find my next career. I originally started out in, like I said, inner city Phoenix with both of my parents. My father was from Oklahoma City and my mother was from Minnesota. They relocated here after meeting at a convention, and they had my sister and I, and kind of that's the backstory so far.
That's a long way from Oklahoma to here to Phoenix. That's a
Yeah,
serious destination travel.
yeah, it is.
What was what was life growing up for you? Both of your parents were blind.
Yep, that's right. It kind of feels like a storybook when I think about it now, because they've since passed. They passed when I was an adolescent, but um, yeah, my mother lost her sight when she was a premature baby. They put her in an oxygen tank. The pressure from the oxygen in there scarred her eyes, and she was blind since birth. My father lost his sight at the age of 6 years old from a benign brain tumor.
Mm.
They cut it out to keep it from infiltrating other parts of his brain. And in doing that, they cut the optic nerve. So from six on, my father was also blind. And yeah, they met. They were both performers. My dad was doing stand-up comedy in Phoenix. My mom was living in Minnesota, and she was a musician. She sang and did jazz music, graduated from college and with a bachelor's in music, and they were both really, really talented people.
it makes you wonder how they navigated through life's journey. I mean, I know you were young. When did you come to the realization of your parents not having eyesight? Like when you're a kid, I think you kind of know, but you don't understand a lot of it. You know what I mean? What was it like for you growing up, knowing that they had
That's a
that?
really good question. And no one's ever asked me that before. I would say, I didn't really recognize the fact that my parents had a so-called disability. It's definitely a disability, but they didn't act like that at all. They functioned and operated as normal parents would, doing everything from cooking to, making sure everything in the house was taken care of. And my sister and I were dressed and off to school. We just had alternative ways of getting around and doing those things. I probably was around the age of 7 when I started to really put the pieces together. Like having blind parents was kind of unique,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was a fairly normal experience for me. The thing that has not been as normal is that as you grow up and you're around other children of the same age, you're a lot more advanced at certain things when you come from that type of environment because you are the eyes for your parents type of thing. We walked everywhere in the city to get places, and we had to really be on high alert and be that second set of eyes for our parents and kind of tell them what's going on. So I've always been kind of like when I was younger, a little more advanced than most of my peers.
What were some of the challenges that you had to endure? Uh, I'm going back in my own mind with my encounters of people, individuals with that disability of blindness, and I remember my first encounter was really when I got out of high school, going to go to college, and I seen a a a a man that was blind would get on the bus and would get off, and he had his stick, and I was just like, how in the heck does he do that? Like maneuver. But what was some of the daily activities that you had to do? Because now, unlike normal kids, they can go play and do all this. I know that they were advanced because they were your parents, but the technology at that time wasn't like it is now. What were some of the roles you had to do as a child for your parents?
Oh, we had some interesting things, but I do want to say, they did a wonderful job of shielding us from any sort of differences that we might experience by having blind parents. I say that because they ensured they were capable of doing everything they possibly could as if they had sight, and so that's probably why I didn't realize they were blind until a little bit older. But for example, some of the unique things that I would say that were probably most remarkable were my mom had bought a tandem bike, and she rode on the back and my 10-year-old sister rode on the front and
Wow.
I rode in a basket in the back. And so, that was certainly different. I was 4 years younger than my sister. So, very, very alternative when it comes to how you would transport your kids as a parent. But both of my parents were raised by their folks to be stubborn, hard headed, never give up, persevere through the tough stuff, don't play the victim role, really dig deep and to try to find it in yourself to just push forward and make the best of your life. And we really didn't have a lot of experiences where we struggled due to their blindness. Now, my mom struggled with alcohol abuse. And so, when I was 8, she took her own life. And at that time, she was the primary parent. So that definitely had a significant impact on my life. But aside from, things that caused more turmoil, their disability was just more unique and kind of eccentric in how we grew up
Mhm.
than it was challenging, I would say.
Right. I'm sorry about the loss of your mother committing suicide, but what was some of the? I know you said alcoholism, so this is a two.
Hmm.
First part of the question is, how did that affect you and your sister? I know it had to be very. impactful for your father, but let's just stick with you and your sister. Did you
Mhm.
guys see the signs that this was maybe about to happen, or it's going to lead up to him, or did she share with you guys things that she might have been dealing with internally that maybe she was afraid to share with you guys, thinking that it might hinder you in some kind of way?
Yeah. It's really it's sad to think about it. Again, I kind of look at it as if it wasn't me because it was so long ago. But there were signs. She drank regularly and kind of like masked it in different ways. She'd mix it with her iced tea. But as I mentioned before, she's a jazz singer. She would sing at nightclubs. She'd be out late. There's access to alcohol all the time. And she would come home and basically black out. To us, she was sleeping, but it impacted my sister and I that there was a lot of neglect. My parents divorced when I was 2. So the time I was 2 to 8 years old when she committed suicide, she was the primary caregiver. And for about the final 3 years we lived with her, she was fairly neglectful. And I don't think that's how she wanted to be. I think that also contributed to her decision to take her own life because my mom was a beautiful soul. She was heavily involved in the community in Phoenix. She was one of the Phoenix Library sponsors and very involved with the blind community. She's a motivational speaker and she just had a beautiful voice. So she was an angel to a lot of folks, but she had, demons like we all do. And unfortunately, she coped with those in a way that really, I think, made her sad and upset with herself. So when she took her life, it impacted my sister and I in a very significant way. And that, my mom was very physically affectionate with us and very nurturing and warm, but she was also very violent. And there was also like lots of ugly parts of that too. And I actually had to see my mom um, after she had committed suicide and have that visual imprint in my mind for so many years. It's kind of faded now, but my sister experienced the same thing. It was just really, really tough. It hurt a lot, and it kind of, I joke about it now because I have a dark sense of humor, but it certainly made a part of me dead. You hear people say they're dead inside.
Mm.
And I'm smiling right now because it's a funny joke today, but back then it was really sad as a kid to feel like that.
Who found your mom, if you don't mind me asking?
It was me. We were spending the weekend with my grandparents. She had planned this out, and she had completed like she made a huge file of brailled communications about why she did it, and I never read that. I never got access to that, but it was nailed to the door of her bedroom, and I ran in to go and give her a hug and open the door, and she had been think she had been passed away for a while. She's like asphyxiated on her throw up because she had drank copious amounts of alcohol and took a bunch of prescription grade Tylenol. So it was a really disturbing experience for me as a kid. And then, as soon as my grandparents caught up with my grandmother and my sister caught up with me, they pulled us away and put us in a room, and neighbors came over to help and that sort of thing.
You mentioned you mentioned something, and I can relate to some degree to what you was talking about when with the loss of my mom. And there was a letter that my stepfather had wrote, and we was not allowed. I wanted to see it, but
Hmm.
we wasn't allowed to see it. And I still to this day I hear bits and pieces.
Hmm.
Um, um, right to this day, even at my age, I don't know what that final
Hmm.
note was. You mentioned, did you know how to read Braille at that time? Did you know how to read Braille at all?
We learned how to read the letters, but not, they also have it out where there's full words. So we didn't really have a way to read it, even if we wanted to, because it would have been a little too advanced for us.
You're 32 years
I'm
old.
39.
I'm trying to go back a little bit with you. Okay. So you're 30, you're 39,
Thank you.
You're 39 years old. And a lot of people, that probably still does it are there moments that you really want to read what it said?
Oh yeah. And then on the other side, at that point in her life, she was so far gone and not herself and just full of just horrible feelings. And alcohol does some really crappy things to you when you have a dependency like that. So I'm almost kind of glad that I didn't read it because it might have been a little too twisted.
Yeah.
She suffered with mental illness that's kind of, part of that alcoholism. And I think it would have been kind of strange. I have the same mental illness as she did, unfortunately, but I can only imagine based on what I've experienced that it was probably a little too twisted for someone to want to ingest and like know. Well, on the other hand, it would have been nice to know what her final thoughts were. She did make a point before her death to give us lots of hugs and tell us that she's always going to be with us. You had asked me, were there cues and things? There were definitely cues. Yeah.
How do you, and that's such a young age. I can relate to at least that part of the transition of losing a parent and then having to go to somebody else. In my case, I had to go stay with my grandmother, which I love my grandmother. I was already there prior to the loss of my mom. So it wasn't a hard adjustment. It was hard because she was no longer my mom. I could never go back there. So you have to deal with that. And at that time, I knew nothing about therapy. I'm very transparent on that, which I asked you that as we move along. So now your transition is going to your father. What was your father's take at that particular point in time? Did he have survival remorse? Or I know they was divorced, but now this is a different thing. You find your mother, and now he has to deal with it. What was that like?
Yeah, my dad had a huge responsibility on his hands at that time. He had recently married his wife, and they had bought a house in Phoenix, a really cute red brick home, and I think they were ready to kind of share their life together. And my mom had my sister and I full time pretty much. So I don't think he was anticipating stepping up and being involved. It makes it sound like my dad was a deadbeat dad in a sense, but that's the complete opposite of who my father was. My mom came from wealth and her father was an attorney, and my dad was very you know, on the lower end of middle class and just trying to make ends meet. And so, in a court battle, my mom won custody of my sister and I, which I don't think was the best decision. But fast forward, when my dad received custody, he wasn't prepared, but he certainly stepped up to the plate. He had, at that time, he was the co-founder, and executive director of Phoenix Youth at Risk, which is now New Pathways for Youth, and one of the largest nonprofits in Arizona, right next to the ballpark stadium. And it's my father's legacy. And, he was just an incredible person. So, not only was he juggling that effort, he was taking care of my sister and I, and he did get us involved in therapy. He made sure that we were, provided with resources, connected with our mother's side of the family, put us in sports, got us involved in different cultural things to get us exposed to, diverse parts of life. And yeah, I mean, he really went above and beyond for my sister and I.
His new wife, was she disabled as well? Was she's blind too?
No, she wasn't. So she was like a 6 foot tall, blonde GI Jane, very pretty lady. And she was sighted and didn't, not that I'm aware of, had no disabilities. And uh, that was my father's stay-at-home wife, and she helped take care of me and my sister.
You mentioned going to therapy at such a young age. Um, did it help you in any way? Because you mentioned that you still suffer from some of the same things that your mom went through.
Hmm.
Were you able to deal with that in therapy, or still did they go into effect? Did they start
Yeah.
manifesting? And what was that?
No, Andre, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question the right way, but therapy was not it for me. I think I needed a lot of love at that time. And I was used to getting a lot of like affection from my mother, and I was little and very lost. I'm sure you can relate with that experience of going to your grandmother's home and you don't really know what your place is at that point. It's just kind of off.
Yeah,
I don't think I was ready to receive therapy. I was definitely stubborn, and I had my both my parents were kind of like pistols, and so am I. And I went into therapy and was like, lady, you're not going to be able to help me. You've never even experienced some of the shit I've been through.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
How are you going to help me? That was my perspective then. I just wasn't receptive to therapy. I was grateful that I had the opportunity to go. I think it was the right thing, but it didn't. It's not something that I was able to benefit from at that time.
It's funny that you said that because when it did happen to me and I went to Georgia, there was there was anger, there was a lot of resentment. I don't know what the resentment, well, it was to God because you always ask why God. And um there was unanswered questions, there was blame. And I was probably just as young as you, but
Hmm.
I really, now that I look back, I don't even think even if therapy was to be able to ball it up, you're right. That's not what I needed. I needed love. I was used to the love that came
Hmm.
from my mom, and that big part. Even though I'm with family, it's not. It's just not the same. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it took me
Yeah.
years
Hmm.
to cope, and I probably did some crazy things, not alcohol and all that kind of stuff. But you brought up something. What started to spiral out of control for you? Because I don't think I spiraled
From.
out of control until much later after high school.
Hmm.
I started making bonehead decisions. I was really just at the point I was really angry
Yeah.
because now I'm adult.
Yeah.
I don't have nothing, and nobody really guided me through this process. What was that like for you? When did you start spiraling out of control?
Very similar story to yours, except I was searching for family right away as soon as I could find it. So when I turned 18, I was waitressing and bartending and things like that to make money and to kind of have my life the way I wanted it.
Yeah.
And again, I was very driven. My parents were very driven, and they gave me a good foundation to know how to do that, which is a blessing. But yeah, I was looking to find stability. Now, in part of that, I was a little reckless, but by the time I was 21, I met my first husband and had a few children with him, and I rushed into that, seeking for family.
Mhm.
After my divorce with him, which only lasted, a few years, I had two children during that time, and once my daughter was 9 months and my son was two, I was divorced and a single mom and kind of trying to find my way. And I think it was at that point where things started to kind of go a little different for me as far as the choices I was making. And, I'm not proud of that at all. I was a mother, and those weren't things I was, should have been doing. But when the kids were with their dad, I would go and have my adult time. And I think that's when my drinking and my abuse of alcohol started. And I wasn't the type of alcoholic that would drink every day at that point. I was just like, when I drank, very heavily into that experience in itself. It's euphoric for me when I drink. I don't think everyone has that feeling. It's just kind of a genetic thing. Some folks are, more predisposed to heightened experiences of euphoria. And for me, that was like the greatest escape. And, it was like a treat for me. I hadn't processed any of the trauma from my childhood. And, I had these two beautiful kids, and I was kind of slowly turning into my mom without knowing it. There's a lot going on. So yeah, I would say it was probably around 2024, 25 when I started to kind of make those poor choices.
Wasn't you worried about losing your kids? I mean, 'cause
Mm.
even through the euphoria phase that you're
Hmm.
going through, the thought of your mom still had to resonate. Your father wasn't deceased at this time though, right? When you was going through
Oh,
this?
he was, yeah. Yeah, my father passed when I was 14, and so that kind of added to the chaos and the additional heartache. And my dad was a role model to me, and the fact that he passed when I was 14 and I kind of bounced around from family houses to halfway house, back to family to friends until I was 18, it put a lot of strain on me as far as developing into a healthy individual.
Right.
Um, you would think that, I love my children. It was the same, probably the same type of experience that my mother had, in a sense, that she loved my sister and I to death. But the choices she was making didn't align to that. It's a hard thing to explain, but it's definitely um, something that a lot of addicts do. They just get so engulfed in that unhealthy coping that you don't even think about those consequences when you should be.
You mentioned going from house to house to halfway houses. Why didn't a family member just step up and provide a solid foundation for you? Because your mother came from wealth and your father
Mhm.
came from pretty well-to-do family. Why didn't somebody step up knowing, what you guys had just went through?
So my dad's brother did. At that time, I was 14. I moved in with my father's brother, my uncle, and his three children that were all a year apart. And he just went through his own divorce and he was struggling. And I was not an easy kid at that point. I was, I wasn't getting into trouble, but I was definitely defiant, argumentative, opinionated, angry. There was a lot that was on my heart that I think was too much for my uncle to handle. He wasn't in a place financially to take care of me, even though there was money coming in from the state. We had trust fund money that was cannibalized by some of my family members, which is really unfortunate. But that's what money does to people. Um, and yeah, my sister and I kind of struggled to find a home when my father passed away. My sister was 18, so she kind of went off and did her own thing as a young adult, but I wasn't able to be emancipated at that point. So there was a certain time where my uncle couldn't take it anymore with me. And that's when I was placed in a group home, a co-ed group home. And then after that, I was able to convince other family members to please take me in, type of thing. But chosen family sometimes is a blessing and a gift, and
What
maybe
was
a good thing to have.
what was that? Take me into your mindset going, into all of these situations, but more importantly, going into a group home. That's like being almost incarcerated. You
Yeah, it was terrible. You nailed it. People don't understand how bad those environments can be for anybody, let alone a kid. That was upsetting. It was another disappointment. I spent my sweet 16 in a group home. There's young boys in there going through puberty. There's no locks on the doors, so you don't have any privacy or safety or security. You're not allowed to even get water without asking. So there's a lot of pressure there. You're eating food that's from food banks, and oftentimes, expired. And I hate to complain and say things about that situation because I was given shelter, but at the same time, it's all relative. You're coming from something where you have a home, um, and then you keep running up against these hurdles that you have to get over, and it just gets worse and worse almost. And at that point, it was a really low point for me in my adolescence, that I just didn't feel like life was fair, I guess. Um, and
did you
knowing my father and things like that kind of helped me get through a lot of that.
with so much loss in such a young age? How did you and your sister manage to keep each other strong?
Hmm. My sister's an incredibly strong individual. She's never done a drug or drank in her life. She kind of like adopted the straight edge lifestyle. She was in like a screamo punk band. My sister almost acted as a parent to me growing up. She's 4 years older than me, so not too much older. But she just found strength in God, and that's not where I found my strength, unfortunately. She went that route, and she got married at 19. She's been married for 22 years, and she's graduating as a doctor of nursing in just a week from today. So I'm
That
really proud of my sister. Yeah. Yeah.
were there how many moments in your life that you can remember that, with so much getting hit, running into the wall, that you ever feared that you was probably might go down the same road as your mom?
I didn't even come to terms with the fact that I went down the same path as my mom until a couple years ago. As
Mhm.
crazy as that sounds. I'm 39 years old, and it took me up until a few years ago to really accept that and come to terms with it and face the demons and say, you need to get your shit straight for like once and for all.
Take me down that what was that when was that moment for you?
It was during my divorce, about 2.5 years ago. After I had my daughter, Luna, and I was finished breastfeeding and kind of getting my independence back and still juggling pressures of work. I was in senior leadership for um, a big startup company at the time. And, I was focused on my career and wanted to be a provider and, all things trying to make my family proud. But I still had the coping of drinking at night, when kids were to bed and work was done, I would drink. And it put a lot of pressure on not only the family, but it put pressure on the marriage too. Um, and my ex and I we divorced about 2.5 years ago, and it part of it was because I had drank so much that I pushed myself into like a mental break.
Mm.
And he was just like, I can't do this, and I couldn't blame him for that. But that's the moment where I pulled my head out of my ass finally. I wish it didn't take that long, but just said enough's enough. I'm never touching alcohol again. It's the worst thing that I've ever experienced, being dependent on it, going through it with my mom. My dad had alcohol dependency as well before he was involved with this nonprofit, and he went through his own sobriety journey. So yeah, I mean, I haven't done as much healing in my life as I have in the last 2.5 years, ever. It's just been a really great experience. And anyone who struggles with alcohol, I would support them, hand over fist, and be a personal role model and support to anyone that's looking to get into that sober lifestyle, because it's a beautiful thing.
That is really a sign of strength because you doing this solo on your own. Are you afraid that unresolved things from your past can re-trigger the need to go
Um,
back? And then if so,
Actually,
do you have, and if so, I mean, these is real questions. I mean, this is life. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I get it. My hats off to you for recognizing and doing what you need to do to not drink anymore. But on the flip side of that, it's playing devil's advocate, or if I guess is what they want to call it. If you still haven't really come to grips with all of the past and it happens to
Mhm.
come back and re-show its face again, what do you have in place to counter, to combat what could or possibly may happen later? That would that would
Yeah.
that would derail you basically.
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't spent a ton of time exploring that. I will say I have an incredible support system now that I didn't have before. I do seek out therapy, not consistently, but if I'm feeling, like I need to get through something that's tough, I'll do that. But the most important part of my sobriety journey is that I really have had it, Andre. I've had it to the point where I'm disgusted by alcohol. I don't crave it. I'm not interested in ever exploring it again. I love my children so much, and they're the most important thing in my life
Mhm.
that I know that I cannot risk drinking some poisonous liquid. Sorry, I know people can enjoy it and it's not detrimental to them, but I can't, and it really is a poison to me on a whole nother level. I've experienced the traumatic loss of my mother and all of the despair and horrible things that come with that. I've done things that have hurt my own children. And I think the fact that I know if I chose to drink again, that it would just destroy my world and destroy parts of my children's spirit and soul, that I have no interest in it. Now, I can't say I would, that who I am right now and how I think right now is who I'm always going to be, but I do ensure that I have that at the top of my mind. I mean, I've tattooed never on my wrist,
Yeah.
um, as a tribute to, never drinking again. It might look cheesy, but for me, it's a daily reminder that, that's never going to be a part of my world again.
You mentioned you mentioned never hurt your children again. Your children are 17, 11, and you have a 3-year-old.
Yeah, 17, soon to be 16, and yeah, a 3.5-year-old.
This the older
Yeah.
two,
Mhm.
you mentioned hurt. You never hurt them again. So I take it that there came to a quote unquote Jesus meeting with you and the two oldest, and they share with you their discontent with maybe some of the actions. If so, what were the things they were sharing with you? The only reason why I'm asking you this
Mhm.
is because somebody else needs to hear this, because
Sure.
this came from your children. What was
Mhm.
that moment that they came to you with? What was bothering them?
Yeah. Uh, so they experienced breaks in my parenting with them several times throughout their childhood. If, it got to a point where my drinking became a significant issue, they would go with their dad. And that was really hard on them. Now they've expressed to me they've never seen me intoxicated, which is hard for me to believe, but at the same time, I did try to hide my alcoholism from them. I tried to do it in the evening when they were asleep and, everything that I could to keep them from that. But there's stuff that you just can't hide. There's behavioral things that you do that maybe when they're older, they'll start to put the pieces together and it'll be a whole nother part trauma to deal with. But um, the way they communicated with me that, you know, they had hurt, they were, fed up is, you know, they were around, gosh, this is 2.5 years ago. So my son was 15 and what, 13 for my daughter. And they were at that point where they could really express their thoughts and feelings because they're starting to become young adults and um, figuring things out, not as naive. And we've always been very close and communicate very well together. They told me that they've had enough. If it happens again, they're not going to have a relationship with me. And I certainly believe them. They're children of integrity and they were raised well. So, they've got a great father. They've got a wonderful life, and um, I completely resonate with them saying that to me, and I was prepared to hear it.
My question here is, that would be something that if it didn't kick you off the horse, then I think you got a problem, serious problem.
Yeah,
If that didn't kick,
yeah,
once you hear this, and we're talking about an illness, so it's not like this is going to be an overnight sensation for you to get into your own recovery.
hmm
Ed, what was the order of operations that you instilled on yourself to get to the point to where you're at today? Because you clearly had to sit down and do a fucking reality check, and then you had to put together a plan of operation in order to make this happen. And all of those plans are not going to work effectively like we want them to work. How did you put your
hmm
plan together? What was your operation here?
Because I really want to make sure I put this in a concise way that's helpful for folks that are going through maybe something similar or have been or want to go on a sobriety journey. I'll try to be as cut and dry as possible. My plan included medication. I've always been opposed to using pharmaceutical drugs to help my mental health, but I had to be on them. So that was part of it. I got on a antidepressant, antipsychotic, a low dose, but I've stayed consistently on that, and it's helped tremendously for the mental health part that actually was, fueling the drinking.
Yeah.
So kind of root causing things and coming to terms with the fact that I needed help in that area. The other part of it was to just be okay with feeling pain, and I put myself in timeout and isolation in a healthy way, and that I was, able to purchase a home with the money I made from my job, thankfully. Even though I was really depressed and going through, getting sober. But I definitely hankered down in my home, made it my sanctuary, made it my safe space, got connected with really healthy female friends who I admired and wanted to be like, and just surrounded myself with folks that inspired me. And then again, a lot of time alone to feel the pain and to just sit in it and be patient with that. I think that's a big part of the journey, and it's something that takes day over day of doing, kind of just sitting in it and feeling the beauty in the pain.
I admire all of that, what you just said, especially sitting down and recognizing your own shit. What role do I have to play in this is the key factor that I think, you know, that may be part of the addiction. What role did I actually play in this? How are you feeling today? How are you feeling today?
It's like a dream. The way I live today is incredible. And to somebody, if they were to look in, they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" But for me, I've just so much to be grateful for. I mean, my kids alone, if you look at them, they're just such great people. That's a wonderful accomplishment. My sobriety journey, I'm very proud of. I've got a nice place to live. Things that keep me happy or enjoying life in a sober mindset and just feeling all the feelings and really experiencing life the way it's meant to be experienced. And I have a lot of opportunity ahead of me. I might be close to 40 as a female, and I've got 3 children and 2 divorces behind me, but I've got so much ahead of me, so much that I can do and I'm excited about, and every day is just a great day. Even if it's full of really frustrating moments, I'm still able to look back on it and be like, geez, at least I'm not in a prison of alcoholism, because that's what it was.
Let me recap a little bit on what you just said to let the viewers understand. I know
Hmm.
you may be like, well, she's changing one addiction for maybe another addiction for medication, but I want to make sure that you clear this up with them. This your treatment plan that you went on,
Hmm.
you consulted with physicians and
Oh
doctors
yeah.
before going. Okay, I just wanted to make sure they was aware of that you didn't just go and
Hmm.
say, I'm gonna put myself on medications. You work closely with medical staff to help you recover correctly and properly, correct?
Yes, I sure did. That's a great question. I went into a facility and had folks, medical professionals monitor me, ensure that I had the right diagnosis. And um, the medication I'm on is a really popular one. It's called Lexapro.
Mhm.
And what it does for me is just kind of keeps me really level. And that's what I need, because I would get in these manic episodes, and that would then lead to delusions of grandeur or kind of panic and anxiety, and that would lead to poor decision making, and you kind of lose this inhibition in your mind. Drinking is involved, again, adds to that. So going down to the root cause of the problem, which is the mental illness piece. And again, my mother had it, her dad had it. recognizing that, understanding it, and then, going on a treatment plan that's recommended by professionals is a really good thing to do if you need it.
You mentioned something that sounds almost generational. I know you're not.
Hmm.
I know you're not a doctor, but are you worried about your children having some of these same mental illnesses? And if so, being a mother and they're still young, how do you address that without causing panic for them?
Hmm. I think it's a lot of making sure that they have stability and a healthy home life, that there's trust and communication, and there's the proper amount of education around it. I think having good open conversation around it when it's appropriate helps a lot. Um, all those things combined can help, but you really, as a parent, have to accept that you can't control every outcome and that they might have those struggles and a painful experience, and you just be there as best as you can for them through that. But for me, prevention and helping my children who might have a potential, um, they might have some of that in them, just through genetics, the education, the stability, the trust and communication really, in my opinion, is going to go a long way.
Before we wrap up, first of all, thank you for coming on and sharing such a beautiful story of perseverance and recovery and beauty all rolled up into one. You I have to say this before we leave. I'm sorry for the loss of both your parents, but the idea that you had two great parents, despite the, let's get rid of the mental illness. Let's get rid of the addiction part of it. Let's look at the positive part to what they really brought to your life. Two individuals that suffered, that had a not suffered, that had a mental, not a mental, but a disability of
Hmm.
blindness, were able to raise two beautiful children despite what they was going through, despite of what took them to the different level. Your father who left a legacy, your mom who left a legacy with you and your sister and working with the blind. Such a great story. How do you tell this story to your children in a way that you just shared it with me and I can see the beauty that they brought into this world despite the
Hmm.
passing? How do you do that with your grandkids? I mean, with your children?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of been a process over time using stories from what I know of my parents to tell my children how both of them were able to navigate the world sometimes better than folks that can see. My father and mother were highly capable, very successful individuals, and in certain areas were, well, in a lot of areas were more accomplished than myself without a disability. And what it came down to was the fact that they never played victim. They never looked at themselves as people that couldn't do it. It's like you can find a way. If you want to do it, you can do it. Is it going to be hard? Yeah, certainly. But if that's what you want and you know the cards that you were dealt, go figure it out. You're the only one who's going to take care of you when it comes down to it. Your mother and father can love you as much as they possibly can, but they're not always going to be around. And that's kind of how I talk to my children too, is, my parents didn't have their parents supporting them throughout their adulthood as blind individuals. They had to figure it out. And like I said, they did it better than me. They really did. I mean, my father and mother accomplished so many great things. It's amazing.
Well, they left a great legacy behind with you and your sister, and the grandkids that they have from you is going to resonate even more higher. You know what? Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share such a beautiful story. How can the viewers reach out to talk to you that may be, like you said, even the shoulder to crown or even somebody to hold their hand
Yeah.
to recover? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, thanks for asking me that. I'm an amateur TikToker. You can find me at Meesh, Meesh, Aiken, Akin, all one word. Aiken's my maiden name. Meesh is my nickname. So Meesh Aiken on TikTok. So
What is an
be
amateur
happy to be a
TikToker?
supporter.
Amateur TikToker. What is that? What is that title?
I'm just starting out. I don't know what
Oh,
lighting to
okay.
use. I don't know what phone settings need to look like, how I should engage, what people like. So I'm just starting out creating content. I've got maybe 4 or 5 videos posted so far.
I wish you the best with that. And ladies and
Thank you,
gentlemen,
Andre.
make sure you guys support her if you have any questions. She's not a doctor, but you know what? Sometimes we can get inspiration from other people that have gone through what we're going through. And I think that'll make the world a better place if we first sit back, walk in somebody else's shoes, and learn to be compassionate with people's stories and taking something from it. Thank you once again for coming on, sharing that story. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast
Thank you, Andre.
Crayton
Thanks for having me.
show.